So picture this. I'm standing in a modern genetic sequencing lab, right? The cold glow of a monitor is lighting up the room, just cascading endless rows of chemical letters A, C, T, G. As a researcher, I look at these sequences literally every single day. But recently, while I was examining the DNA of a 63-year-old woman from a really small fishing community in Odisha, I stumbled onto something that absolutely blew my mind. Hidden right there, deep in her blood, was a 65,000-year-old secret of totally unbroken survival. It's just wow. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to read the silent biological ledger of the Indian subcontinent.
Okay, let's jump right into this massive 65,000-year timeline. We'll be looking at the record in the blood, the first wanderers, and the Great Ice, early farmers and doctors, Harappa's geometry of trust, the Great Genetic Freeze, and finally our living genetic democracy today. Let's go. We really have to ask ourselves a pretty profound question right off the bat. If we're all supposedly so different, why does our DNA tell a completely different story? Historically, we've been taught to view our society like this vertical ladder of stark differences, rigid silos, the whole shebang. But here's the thing. The genetic sequencer machine, it doesn't read colonial ledgers. It doesn't read historical texts. It reads pure biology. And that biology points to a radically different, entirely shared foundation. Which brings us to the crucial point, haplogroup M. Think of this as the unbreakable female lineage that acted like the ultimate sponge. It literally absorbed every subsequent wave of migration into one shared foundation. Today, we find this exact marker in over 60% of modern Indian women. This is what we call the maternal matrix, the true biological bedrock of the subcontinent. While empires were rising and falling and conquerors were pouring in from every possible direction, this silent, continuous genetic thread held completely firm. Section 2, Wanderers and the Great Ice, the First Indians. Our story actually begins way back at the Bab el Mandeb Strait, also known as the Gate of Tears, which is where the tall, robust, ancient ancestral South Indians first crossed out of Africa. Tracing their physical journey is wild. Just picture these women navigating totally alien coastlines, foraging for shellfish, and literally pushing through the choking volcanic ash of the Mount Toba supereruption. And then, when global temperatures just absolutely plummeted during the freezing, dry last glacial maximum, they didn't just give up and vanish. No way. They strategically retreated into these rugged mountain caves, keeping their families alive until the ice finally melted, and then they re-expanded across the subcontinent. Talk about resilience. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the ancient survival rituals of these resilient women evolved so seamlessly into the spiritual traditions we see around us today. 15,000 years ago, these ancestral foragers honored their dead by burying them showered in red ochre hematite. And today, that exact same ritual use of red ochre continues in the red sindoor and kumkum applied during modern weddings and festivals. The symbolism has definitely adapted over time, sure, but the color itself and that underlying connection to the ancient mothers, it's identical. Section 3, Farmers, Synthesis, and Early Doctors, the Zagrosian Arrival. Fast forward to around 7000 BCE. Severe climate shifts and droughts drove Zagrosian herders eastward through the Bolan Pass right to the edge of the Kachi Plain. And this brilliantly illustrates a key fact. Mehergar wasn't some violent conquest. It was a genuine biological synthesis. Imagine ASIA women who were absolute masters of the local terrain and knew exactly which wild plants to forage, meeting Zagrosian men who were bringing in seeds and leading domesticated goats. They literally merged at the family hearth, building mud brick homes together. It's genetic democracy in action, producing a new generation that carried both incredible legacies forward. 9,000, that's a massive number, right? Well, that's exactly how many years ago this incredible synthesis yielded some astonishing medical advancements. Look, the transition from coastal foraging to stable farming was physically brutal on the human body. It actually reduced average human height and introduced a bunch of new diseases. But the sheer scale of agriculture allowed for massive societal innovations. Right there at Mehergar, 9,000 years ago, early doctors were using precision flint drills to treat tooth decay in living patients. Living patients. It's just a staggering testament to their social stability and shared knowledge. Moving on to Section 4, Harappa's Geometry of Trust, the Urban Zenith. Building right on top of that early synthesis, by 2600 BCE, the Harappan civilization reached its urban peak. And what's wild is what's missing, a startling lack of royal tombs. They built these vertical monuments. Actually, scratch that. They didn't build vertical monuments to egomaniacal kings at all. Instead, they built a horizontal geometry of trust,
4:2:1. They standardized this exact mathematical brick ratio, length to width to thickness, across an astonishing 1.5 million square kilometers. This egalitarian urban planning fostered a vast, trusted global economy. A merchant in Lothal knew for a fact that a brick or a standard weight would be the exact same in Harappa.
But as always, the climate shifted again. When a massive megadrought dried up the Saraswati River, the cities weren't destroyed by invading armies, they just sort of dissolved back into the land. It was a completely peaceful, democratic abandonment. Families packed up their copper tools and carnelian beads, and they simply walked away, spreading their egalitarian, beautifully synthesized genetic legacy eastward toward the Ganges and southward across the Vindhyas. Section 5. The Great Genetic Freeze, DNA's Hidden Record. Let's fast forward past the arrival of steppe pastoralists, whose men, by the way, smoothly merged with local Harappan women at the family hearth to around 100 CE. This is when the fluid genetic river of the subcontinent suddenly hit a massive dam. Even with Emperor Ashoka carving egalitarian edicts into rock everywhere, shifting economics changed the game. As populations boomed, cleared farming land became incredibly valuable. So, local elites facing these new agricultural pressures started inventing strict rules of endogamy, marrying strictly within their own specific group. They weren't doing it to be malicious, they were just trying to protect their land and control inheritance. But the result? It carved hierarchy directly into the human genome.
So we end up with two totally stark realities. On one hand, we have the artificial vertical hierarchies, the endogamy and social ladders codified by post-100 CE texts to enforce genetic silos. But on the other hand, looking strictly as researchers analyzing the biological data, we see the absolute truth, a horizontal plane. The biological evidence proves that beneath every single colonial and caste wall, there lies the exact same shared maternal bedrock of haplogroup M. The patriarchs built the walls, sure, but the matriarchs made absolutely sure that everyone shared the identical foundation.
Now, looking impartially at the genomic data, we have to talk about the direct physical consequences of this freeze. 2 millennia of forced genetic isolation essentially trapped rare recessive mutations inside specific communities. In genetics, we call this the founder effect, and it created severe medical time bombs. Specific mutations got completely locked in, things like extreme anesthesia paralysis risks in the Arya Visa community, cardiac arrest risks in Gujarati Patels, and super high beta thalassemia carrier rates among the Khatri and Aurora communities. And we're literally only just uncovering the scale of these crises today through modern genome projects. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the living genetic democracy, the Great Thaw. Because thankfully, the story absolutely does not end in frozen silos. Today, right now, we are right in the middle of the Great Thaw. Those ancient artificial walls are coming down incredibly fast, driven by 3 huge factors. First, the urban solvent. Modern city life forces us all to share space, ride the same trains, eat in the same cafeterias, which completely dissolves old ritual distances. Second, the digital hearth. Algorithms on modern dating apps are replacing rigid birth-based matchmaking. And third, the self-aware genome. Personal DNA testing is shattering the myth of pure lineages once and for all, proving to people that they are this magnificent, ancient mixture. And you can literally see this thaw in the data. Back in the 1950s, inter-community marriages were practically non-existent, under 4%. But project forward to urban centers today, and up to 60% of matrimonial profiles explicitly state "cast no bar." This massive modern shift, it isn't some rebellious rejection of the past. It's actually a biological return to the fluid, highly interconnected Harappan spirit that originally built this incredible civilization in the first place. And this brings us to a really powerful realization. As researchers staring at the biological ledger day in and day out, the data is indisputable. History texts were written by the victors, people who desperately wanted to draw lines, build vertical ladders, and secure their own power. But the truth? The truth is written in our blood. And the blood proves that the matriarchs, those amazing women who survived the ice and the Great Migrations, ensured that every single one of us was built on the exact same, unbroken foundation. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Your very cells contain the survival story of 65,000 years of human synthesis. You literally carry the legacy of that ancient beach where the first wanderers crossed out of Africa, right inside of you. Knowing this indisputable truth, that we are all woven from the exact same genetic fabric, how will you choose to see your fellow humans tomorrow?